All right, we have Mike Bruesewitz coming back onto the show. Mike, I'm very grateful for your time here, coming back onto the show. Last time we talked a little bit about your injury and how you were coming back from rehab. Just give us an update on where's your ankle at, and are you looking to continue your pro career here?
Yeah, good to be back. Always enjoy coming on Sports Chat with Matt with you. It's
Yes,
been a
sir.
good conversation, so excited to get back on here. In terms of me, I'm good. Last time we spoke, I was coming back from a couple ankle surgeries after I fractured my ankle down in Mexico last October. So everything has been going well. I've been really taking my time with this injury just because I've had to have two different surgeries. And actually, just this morning, I got done doing about an hour on the court workout and was in the weight room again. So, been trying to really push myself these last like month and a half. Finally, started playing 5-on-5 again with some professionals down here in Puerto Rico and hopefully be able to get some native status and play as a Puerto Rican native player since I've lived down here for 3+ years now in the league down here in Puerto Rico, and hopefully enter the draft either this year. I'm trying to make a case to enter the draft this year or enter the draft in 2025. So I'm about like 95% healthy and looking for another job and hopefully get to
Yeah.
continue my basketball playing career.
Yeah. How do you think you're feeling like right now versus before your injury?
I'm feeling pretty good. My ankle is just a little bit tighter, my right one, but I've had quite a few injuries on that. I'm just I will say this: I'm not going to be as aggressive trying to dunk on people as I was before. And my verticality is my vertical game is a little bit lower now, but luckily for me, I've made a kind of a name for myself as a pro to shoot the basketball and run teams as a stretch four and really be a much more cerebral player. And my lateral quickness is still pretty good,
That's
which is
key.
really important for me.
That's king.
Yeah, really important
Yeah.
for me as a four man, especially when I'm playing defense. Just being able to switch one four ball screens, two four ball screens, stuff like that. So, feeling really good. Like I said, I've been playing 5-on-5 with a lot of guys who play professionally down here in Puerto Rico, and been holding up super well. Playing hour and a half games, not having any problems afterwards. So I'm really excited. I'm very happy to be healthy. It's been a long road, so it's been fun.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's cool for me. Obviously, you're like a childhood player for me, so I'm glad to hear that you're still hooping here. So, yeah. Next question. Just if you could go and talk about what does native status exactly mean in Puerto Rico, and why are you pursuing that?
Um, So the reason I'm pursuing that is I moved down here a few years ago just to kind of one, I like the culture down here. I like being where it's warm all the time. And the other reason is if you live on the island for 3 years and you're outside of the league as an import for 3 years, you become a native player. And the difference between a native player and an import, or a refuerzo, as they call it, and reinforcement is the passport status. So if I play as an import here, it means I'm not Puerto Rican. I am an American or European or have a nationality outside of Puerto Rico, and that happens in many other leagues too. So native players are always common. And when I went to Europe, we always had a limit on the number of imports or the number of different passports you could have on a team. So some countries it was 4 imports, guys that were not, if I played in Latvia, you'd have 4 Americans, or you could have like 3 Americans and a Lithuanian player or somebody outside of that country. And the biggest difference is just the amount of jobs that I can take. So for when I'm an import for jobs, it's I have to compete against every other American that's trying to look for jobs. So that includes guys just coming out of college, as well as guys that are exiting the NBA and trying to find and continue to find and play here. So Puerto Rico has a really strong league. And a lot of the teams here are looking for ex NBA guys. Last season
Sure.
in Puerto Rico, they had I want to say 18 ex NBA players. Alfred Payton was down here, Kenneth Fareed, DeMarcus Cousins, Hassan Whiteside, um,
Wow.
Brandon Knight, Mike Scott. The list kind of goes on and on. Just most recently, yesterday, Willie Cauley Stein just signed with one of the teams down here. So there's a push that the potential for Dwight Howard to sign with a team down here. So a lot of the import jobs are going to ex NBA guys, and so it's a little bit more difficult for me to get into this market as an import. and there's only 24 import jobs. Whereas if if I'm a native player, I have about 80 roster spots to compete for. So it just
Okay.
kind of helps me with the pool of getting jobs.
Good deal. No, very cool. And yeah, moving back to the current Badgers here. Obviously, this is a different look team. They're probably a little bit more entertaining for you as an alumni than last year's team. They obviously are more entertaining, so probably more enticing for you to follow. And they had a huge week this week. Let's go straight into the Minnesota game. If you could give me your general thoughts of what you saw from Wisconsin against Minnesota.
Loved the game because, like we kind of talked about, their pace of play has picked up a lot. They're allowed to have a little bit more wiggle room than when I was
Yeah.
playing under Bo Ryan. Coach Gard has done a great job of kind of evolving a little bit within the college game and letting his guys play. Also, the talent he has on the roster this year compared to last year, especially offensively, has shifted and not even necessarily the talent like overall. It's just guys have improved. Guys have gotten much more
Mhm.
comfortable. Last year's team was super reliant on Tyler Wall being the main playmaker and creator, as well as Chucky Hepburn. And this year they got guys, 3, 4 different guys that are making plays for them. If you go up and down the starting lineup, Chucky's been a really solid point guard. He hasn't shot the ball super well yet this year, but I think he'll pick that up. But, his decision making, his ability to get into the paint. He's also become a much better pick and roll player, especially being an assisting pick and roll player. He's finding those passing lanes to throw to Stephen Crowell, to Tyler Wall, to Nolan Winters, and those guys. He's done a great job of figuring out how to pass out of his pick and roll spacing, which has been awesome to see. The addition of Max Klesmit coming in last year. Just his confidence and his ability to kind of understand how the league works now. You've really seen it. His game is just, he's playing with so much confidence right now, and it's awesome to see. And then,
Yeah.
obviously, the transfer of AJ Storr coming in. We discussed this a little bit off camera last time, and he's just a different monster. He's got that kind of that wing mold that has been really successful at Wisconsin. Most recently was, Johnny Davis, but even before that, it was Sam Decker and Nigel Hayes coming through, those guys kind of at the wing, those mid post stuff. So he's been really fun to watch because he just gives them a different attack on the wing with his speed,
Yeah.
his athleticism, and Coach Gard is really letting him kind of be himself and be that athletic slasher and allowing him to make some mistakes. And especially early in the year, he allowed him to make some mistakes, and now it's really paying some dividends. And then the freshman Blackwell and the freshman Winter have been awesome coming off the bench, as well as having some instant scoring with Connor Esigian coming off the bench. It really kind of changes the dynamic of the team. And then Stephen Crowell's growth has been awesome. He's turning over his left shoulder. He's turning over his right shoulder. He's becoming a two-way player in the post. And you could really see, his ability to finish and be a monster as well as be a passer. He's a really, really good
Yeah.
facilitator for them. So this team has a lot of balance and a lot of options to score, which has been really, really fun to see.
Yeah, and hitting their potential. Like now that Esigian looks like he's finding his footing, that's just another level this Wisconsin team is hitting, where they're even more dangerous than they were a few weeks ago, and they were really good a few weeks ago. And Nolan Winter coming in and hitting 2 threes last night against Michigan State. That's a positive sign. He hit one against Minnesota. Yeah, for me, this Wisconsin team has a super high ceiling. And I think the one thing that will take them further is Chucky Hepburn. He's playing fantastic this year. And like, if you look at his stats, and people probably don't follow Wisconsin, they take a look at his stats from last year and this year. Probably think he took a step back, but he has been so much better. He's just such a facilitator this year. He's a true point guard. But once his 3-point percentage, he's got a good looking shot. Last year, he shot in the 40s from threes. He's at about like 27, 28 right now. If he can get that up, I think that's the final level for Wisconsin, where all of a sudden they become like a title contender. And am I crazy to think that this Wisconsin team can compete for a national championship?
No, I think overall this is a team. Like if you look at some of the the Ken Palm stuff and some of the other statistics around college basketball, they have a lot of quad one wins. Also, just their strength of schedule. I mean, they've played a tough schedule, and they've performed super well. That game down in Arizona a couple months back, you kind of look at the growth that they had from that game. They got down,
Yeah.
they went down to Arizona and they kind of ran into a buzzsaw. But Arizona's tough to play in their arena, as well as they're just kind of
Nice.
a different animal that they haven't really seen. They're a top 5 team, and they played well, but it kind of showed them, oh, okay, this is the class that we're going to compete with. And I think if they would to play that game now, it would be a dogfight.
I agree.
And for me, looking at this team, like you were talking about Chucky for an example. Yeah, Chucky's numbers might be down scoring wise, but if you look at the quality of shots that he creates for his teammates and
Mhm.
himself, he's taking better shots. And like I said earlier, he is becoming a proficient pick and roll point guard, where he is facilitating and getting to his spots and making so many correct decisions. He's making the 95 to 98% play every time, and he's making it at a high level, and he's still taking some risks and throwing some different passes, but he is really engineering this team to where it needs to be offensively, and putting guys that
Yeah.
have improved so much offensively in really good spots to succeed. And that's the thing where you might not notice it, where like, oh, he threw a ball, he threw a pass to a guy cutting, and he threw him open to give him an opportunity to get to a layup instead of throwing it behind him or being a half a second late. So his decision making has been awesome, and it's really kind of pushed them into a different level. And yeah, like you said, once he starts knocking down shots, teams aren't going to be able to continue to go under on him on ball screens. They're going to start going over, which is only going to make him more effective. So hopefully he finds his jumper here, and I think he will, because I know I've heard from through the grapevine, he's a kid who puts in a lot of work. But yeah, I definitely think they have a chance to win win a bunch of games in the tournament, and make it all the way to a Final Four because of how they can win. The biggest thing with the tournament is you're going to play different styles, and you're going to have nights that are going to be rough, and you got to be able to figure out how to win games in multiple ways. And they've gone down to the buzzer, and this week is a great example. They played Minnesota. It was in the barn. It's kind of a weird shooting place. It's always a more challenging place to play because of the arena, and they won a
Mhm.
game below 60 points. They won a game in the 60s and the 50s, and then all of a sudden they come back and they play Michigan State, and they put up 80 plus points. So the ability to not only win in lower scoring, defensive, kind of grinded out games, and then also be able to put up points like that, and be able to go and score with teams that maybe some night you're just like, man, our defense is just not going to be able to, or teams are just knocking shots down, and you got to be able to go shot for shot with them sometimes. And that's kind of the true hallmark of a team that can go really deep in the tournament, is one that can win in multiple ways. And not only can this team do it, but they have multiple guys that can step up on different nights, which makes them extra dangerous.
Yeah, no doubt. And just one final note on Chucky that I did not mention is just something that is under the radar for him a little bit, but defensively, he is such a dog. He can move his feet so well laterally, and then he's physically a strong dude. Like I don't know how tall he is. Truly, he's listed 6'2", but he is thick. So he can move his feet really well laterally, and he's very quick. So I think that the combination of him and Klesman defensively, that's one of the toughest defensive backcourts in the country, in my opinion. And then another thing with Chucky is last season, what he has improved on clearly statistically is his 2-point field goal percentage. It was really down last year, and
Mhm.
this year that's skyrocketed. So that's key. He's making his twos, and he's finishing around the hoop much better than he did last year. Um, but yeah,
Definitely.
let's hop into that Michigan State game a little bit, and I'll share some of the thoughts that I had watching that. Well, one, I had the honor to be at the game, and I
Nice.
pulled off probably the most amateur move you could probably pull off, and this is embarrassing, but I'm going to share it. I when I was looking at the schedule, I assumed the websites were adjusting for Central Time Zone where I'm living. I assumed they were adjusting, but the standard is the East Coast. So I saw 8 p.m. somewhere, but it was really 7 p.m. So I show up and it's halftime. That's one of
Oh
the
no.
that's bad, man. That's some rookie amateur hour stuff. But the second half, man, it
Yeah,
was
you showed up. You showed up late, man. You don't want to get there for warm ups. Like for me, I like to get to games like 45 minutes to an hour before, just because I don't want to deal with all the traffic, and I like to see how guys
yeah.
warm up and who looks ready to play at night. But I don't know where you were coming from exactly, so there's
Oh
also that you might have
well,
work or
well,
other
it
things.
just It was just not my best moment. That's all it was. I like to get there a little early and then soak in the atmosphere, but yeah, it happened. It happened, but I got to enjoy the second half. Luckily, I got in. I was worried I wouldn't get in because I got a text during the game, and someone was like, "That wasn't a foul on a siege," and I'm like, "Wait, what's going on here?" So, oh well. But that Michigan State
Yeah,
game, I got to watch back the first half, and then the second half, I got to see in person.
nice.
What stood out to me was the rebounding battle, the rebounding margin. Once again, Wisconsin beat them early in the year, 35-22, and they won this rebounding battle 30-23. And that's something where Izzo had that on his whiteboard that hey, you got embarrassed by these guys on the boards, and it didn't matter because Michigan State, they were coming in, they were a bunch of hacks, they were playing physical as hell, and Wisconsin just was the better team. They withstood it, they brought it, they matched the physicality. This team, the depth, the strength, the athleticism, like they really check all the boxes for me. So, yeah, give me your thoughts on how Wisconsin performed yesterday against Michigan State, and what areas can this team still improve?
I mean, yesterday you kind of saw it. Like, this is they got a little bit of an older group too now, right? Like they got
That's huge.
the depth comes from their freshmen, but if you look at it, Wall has been there for a while. Obviously, Stephen Crowell's been there. I think is he a senior this year or is he a junior?
He's a redshirt junior.
Uh,
He's coming back next year.
Yeah, he's a redshirt
Told
junior.
you.
So he's been there for 4 years. Yeah, so he's got that. Chucky's a junior this year. They got guys that have been in the program now for a couple years. So this team is looking a little bit more like the teams that Bo Ryan has put together back when I was coming through. We would always have upperclassmen kind of lead the way, and they would be a lot stronger, and we would be able to finish games. And yesterday it was great to see, Stephen Crowell was in the post getting busy.
Yeah.
He had, a couple of really nice up and unders, a couple of really nice finishes. He turned and shot a left-handed jump hook, which I haven't seen him shoot too many of them. He always is trying to get to his right hand. And,
Mhm.
that's just the growth of him as a post player, which has been great to see. And, we talked about earlier, that combination of this team being able to score inside, but also they got a wing threat. They got shooters. They're really complementing each other well. And yeah, that rebounding battle is always a thing when you play Michigan State. Tom Izzo has been, preaching if we win the glass, we win the game since I don't know,
Mhm.
since 1970 or whenever he started coaching all those years ago. He's been around. He's a legend. He's been
Yeah.
there forever. So,
No doubt.
it was always really big when I was in school too. It was always, hey, we have to win the rebounding battle against them because like they are coming for the offensive glass. That is one of the hallmarks of Michigan State basketball. They want to win the backboard. And, them being, Wisconsin being just able to handle that physicality and then move forward through it. I think it's going to give them a lot of confidence too. Because, as a player, when you're playing against somebody and they're really, really physical and they want to hit you and everything like that, it means one of two things. One, it's their style of play. But two, it's like, oh, past the physicality, I don't really have a whole lot. So I got to use this as much as I can to try and impede your progress. And Wisconsin was
Mhm.
like, all right, cool. They took the hits and we're like, oh, that's all you have? Perfect. I'm going to continue to win. I'm going to continue to make plays. I'm going to continue to finish. And you can see what happens after you get past that physicality. Wisconsin was fine. They did a great job. I think for them to improve, just continuing to find flow, continuing to find rhythm with each other. There are some times where it's super normal in college basketball. There are some nights where it's just like, man, they're turning the basketball over. It's like, well, yeah, they're a bunch of 18 to 23-year-old kids. Like that's what
Yep.
happens. You need a little bit more variance in college basketball than you do in the professional level, just solely based on age and maturity levels. But, overall, this team just needs to keep, finding flow, finding rhythm. Guys need to find some more confidence in their jump shots, specifically Chucky. It's great to see that Connor got really kind of feeling good about himself last night.
Yeah.
He had one, I think it was after he hit four, and he took that one super deep for five. And for me, some people think
Yeah.
of that as like, oh man, I don't know if you should take that shot or anything. And for me as a player and kind of understanding where he's been mentally kind of down, his mentality to be like, no, I am shooting this and I think this is going to go in is actually awesome to see. The fact that he
Yeah.
missed it is irrelevant at this point. because, he had already hit 4 before, but it's just like, no, as a shooter, as a scorer, when you have that mentality, it means you're feeling good. It means you're not worried about getting pulled out. He's just like, I don't care. If I get pulled out because of this, I get pulled out because of this. And that's okay. That's a good mentality to have. And I think Coach Gard has kind of continued to encourage him to shoot something like that, because that 5th three he shot, that was about 2-3 feet past the NBA range. That thing was out there. And for me,
He's
I was
fearless.
so happy to see him do it. Yeah, I was so happy to see that. Like, that's a really great sign, even though it wasn't a super great shot, but it was a great sign
Yeah.
for me. Like, it's like, oh, okay. Plus, he had already hit 4 before. So for me, I'm as a coach, good shot, man. Keep it going. Like, and I think he allowed him to kind of continue with that. So it was great to see. And yeah, and continuing to build the confidence of these freshmen. Like you said, Nolan Winter hit 2 threes. He hit a 3 against Minnesota. He's going to be super big for them, especially kind of moving down, because him and Crowell have kind of similar games, especially when they were younger. Crowell came in as a freshman, and he was more of a pick and pop 5-man, and Winters is that right now. And just having him as a backup, being like, oh, okay, he can come in and he's not afraid and he will take shots. He might not always knock them down, but at least he will take shots, which is really, really important, because, you need to have your reserves be confident enough to make plays for you. You can't have guys come into games, especially, tournament time, late March, where you're like, oh man, this moment might be too big for them. And so for them to come in and do that, it's great. So overall, I think they're just going to get better defensively and more connected, hopefully, and staying healthy. Those are the two biggest things, is, continuing to build on the connectivity that they have, and staying healthy. If they can stay healthy, they'll be a real problem, and continue to be.
Yeah. And if they, just kind of going back to an earlier point, if they were to match up against an Arizona, because, the way I see it after that Arizona game, I was like, well, this kind of stinks. It looks like Arizona is by far the best team in college basketball. It looks like there's not going to be parity. But then Arizona's kind of fizzled. Like, they've lost to Oregon State the other night. They got blown out by Stanford. Like, Arizona's fizzled, and I don't think there's a great team in college basketball. Like, I'm not overly afraid of anybody. So I'm excited. I think there's parity, and if there's a year to do it, this could be the year. When Wisconsin had that team in 2015, like, college hoops, the top teams that year were absolutely loaded. Like, they were ridiculous how good the top 4 or 5 teams were. This year, like, Wisconsin's got another really good team, but I don't think there's that same issue where the top teams are just ridiculously good. So I'm excited about that. But the next thing is obviously AJ Storr, man. He's so fun to watch. He's having an incredible year. A big reason that Storr came to Wisconsin was the success Johnny Davis had, where Gard said, hey, we had Johnny. He was a good athlete. Look what we did in the offense. He thrived, running up for National Player of the Year. And now AJ Storr is going to be a contender. He's on the watch list. He's going to be a contender for National Player of the Year. Obviously, Zach Edey is going to win that thing, but he'll have his name on the list. So do you think moving forward, this can be a recruiting tool where, hey, like, maybe perhaps not outside the program narratives can shift, but where inside, like, you can look at a recruit and say, hey, look what we did with Johnny. Look what we did with AJ. When we get that next level athlete, they do well here. Do you think this can start changing things, and Gard can start winning a few more battles in whether it's the portal or high school with these elite level athletes?
I think overall, like, the problem that the program has had is a lot of perception is they have some success in college, and then once they get to the pros, they haven't been able to kind of take that next step, right? Like Johnny Davis, he was a high draft pick. Right now, he's still having an issue trying to get in and out of the league. He's still young, and he can improve his game. But I think for sure, like, Gard has, they kind of, like, I've heard on some broadcasts, like, oh, they love to go back to their swing offense so much. And it's like, yeah, they run it from time to time, but it's not as consistent as it has been. It's a lot more high pick and roll. They've evolved. Coach Gard has really done a nice job of kind of mixing and matching some professional sets more with some college sets. Where he's got some really good quick hitters, and he's putting guys coming in off of down screens. I've seen him ran some, high ball screens with exit screens where it's like a down screen on the same side as the ball screen coming to. So, Coach Gard has been doing really well tactically, putting these guys in a lot of positions, and AJ has just been dominant. Also, like we said earlier, Coach Gard has really given them a little bit longer of a leash,
Yeah.
and allowed guys to kind of flourish and take a little bit more risk. When I was playing, a turnover, a tough shot, for me, a lot of times I would end up on the bench. And
Yeah.
Coach Ryan had his leashes for a couple of his guys. When I was playing, I remember I was a sophomore, and my primary role was being more of a defender, kind of a rebounder, hustle guy, and our scorers were John Lure and Jordan Taylor, and they had longer leashes, because we needed them to go get points for us. They were our bucket getters, and so
Yeah.
for him, AJ is now kind of turned into that. Like, no, I got to be the scorer. I got to take pull ups, and he's getting great shots. That's the other thing is like, even though he's got a longer leash, like AJ has been getting really, really quality looks. He doesn't take a lot of wild shots, and I think that's been really positive, because it and I think that's partially who AJ is as a player, but also like how he understands what Coach Gard wants. That's something that is duality. You got to figure out like, hey, I want you to be the best player you can be, but I also need you to do it within this kind of context. I can't have you doing crazy one-legged jumpers and all that stuff. But that's something that's been really cool to see is how efficient AJ has been, and especially in transition, man. He is a monster, because his ability to jump off of both legs. He is
Yes.
athletic off his right foot and his left foot, which is not so common for guys. Guys
Yes.
usually, like for me specifically, I'm much more of a left foot jumper. I'm much better jumping off my left foot, loading with my right hand than my right foot. Whereas AJ had a dunk in the Minnesota game, went through traffic and ended up jumping off his right foot, and you can see he
Yeah.
does it both ways. And it's when you have somebody like that, it allows when you have that ability, it allows you to do some different stuff in transition. And yeah, I think for recruiting, like kids that are athletic and have some decent skills, and also AJ has a high basketball IQ. That's the other thing is you're kind of like, yes, he's athletic, but he understands how to play the game. And guys who do that are going to be successful in this program.
Yeah. Is he? Who's your favorite player to watch this year?
Oof. To be honest, I have really enjoyed watching Chucky, uh, because I remember watching games last year, and there was just always a couple things that kind of bothered me. Like I've actually enjoyed watching this team as a whole for two reasons. One, their spacing and their understanding of cutting out of spacing has been much better, which is a testament to Coach Gard. And then the other thing that I've really enjoyed watching them is they are executing late in games. They're figuring out how to win. The last year there would be times where they would come out of a timeout and it's a close game, and then all of a sudden things would kind of go to hell and chaos would ensue, and you'd look on the sideline and Coach Gard would just be like, what are you guys doing? I didn't draw this up, or hey, this wasn't what we tried to do to execute. And you could see it on his face. Like I remember seeing it at a few different times. There was one in, I think, the Nebraska game last year where they lost in double overtime. That was a real rough loss for them. Like they were up the whole game and then they had a chance and they drew something up, and like at the end of the game, and that's not the shot they got. Like Chucky took like a pretty tough contested 2-point shot, and you look at Coach Guard's face, it's like, yo, what are we doing out here? And this
Yeah.
whole team has bought in more to him as a coach and trusted him more. And for me, I've really enjoyed watching their spacing and their execution, and just Chucky understanding how to play the game as a point guard. For me, I like to think of the game I think of the game more as like a point forward when I play. Now, as I've played for almost 10 years as a pro, a lot of times my best position is when I can make decisions on the top of the floor and see stuff. And Chucky's been awesome to watch just because of how much more efficient, and his understanding of the game has just grown so much in a year. And he's been really fun to watch for me.
Awesome. And one more AJ Storr question: is he gone after the
Okay.
season? Yeah. How do you think his game
He's got to be.
translates?
I, I think his game translates super well. I mean, I know the thing is too, is he had a summer where this past summer he played for, I want to say either the Bahamas or the Dominican national team. I can't remember which
Yeah. Yeah.
national team he played for. But he got kind of exposed to some professionalism down here. And, I think for him, what he'll end up doing is for him, it's silly, or I wouldn't say silly. it is advisable for him to leave. And the reason being is it's hard to replicate what you did the year before, as well as you get older, you get more scrutiny. So it's actually like the NBA wants to have guys that, there's still a little bit of wonder about your game. Whereas like in college, if you stay for a full 3 or 4 years, they're kind of like, oh, we kind of know what your game is and we know what that's going to do in the next level. And we kind of understand what's going to happen. But like if you take a kid that's a freshman or, even guys coming out of high school or, it's really that freshman, sophomore, it's like there is film that he can be successful and there are things he can do. But we're not sure there's still that allure of his potential, right? And so for AJ, like, right now, if he's going to have this type of season, it's all about maximizing your potential and maximizing your ability to make money. So, he can leave, and I think it's advisable he should, especially if he's going to get, a first-round draft pick, or even if it's first or late first-round pick. I still think it's advisable for him because as much as Wisconsin is a great program, the transition from a college game to an NBA level game, it's a different animal. It's a different game of basketball. The spacing is different. The style of play is different. College is a little bit more about sets and a little bit about more team action, where NBA and professional is especially specifically in the NBA, it's a lot about matchups. And so for him, unless we got some big donors out there who want to, shell out some big money, because you guys do have some. Here's the thing about Wisconsin. We got some money there. There is a lot of people who are very intelligent who went to that school and have businesses and all that stuff. So if you guys want to break out the NIL money to keep him there, it's going to be a lot. But you could do it. Could be guaranteed money for him and he could enjoy it too. But, if I'm AJ in that position, I'm leaving. Thank you for the opportunity, but this is now where I got to grow my game, and I think for him, it's his ultimate goal too. Succeeding at Wisconsin is the primary goal, and then the ultimate goal for his career is definitely trying to make it to the league. I'm pretty sure that's what he would like to say.
Sure, and how does this team with AJ Storr? How do you think this team? It's early. It's still January. I mean, things could go right, things could go wrong, but based off what you're seeing, how does this team stack up compared to those 2014 and 2015 Final Four teams?
I think they're up there. I don't think they're as good. I think they're close, but if you look at those 2015 or 2014, 2015 teams, one thing that those teams had was a lot of positional size, and I think this team has some size, but they're just not as big. Also, like Frank and Sam, those guys were 2 NBA lottery picks. And so when you have, 2 NBA lottery picks, as well as like Nigel Hayes was, like their third option. And Nigel was super tough. They had Nigel coming in, and he was, really, really good. Plus, defensively, they were so connected defensively and offensively. Like if you just look at their fluidity, I think this team has some of that. But overall, I think those two 14 and 15 Wisconsin teams are, the fact that they didn't win a national championship is one, a testament to how good the 2 teams that beat them were. The Kentucky team that beat them, multiple first round picks, like a couple of NBA All-Stars, all that stuff that beat them that one year. And then, when they lost to Duke, my guy, Tyus Jones, like Tyus is tough. I trained with his brother and I've trained with Tyus for a long time. He's a Minnesota kid. So I've known Tyus since he was in high school. I was watching that game and I was like, oh, I don't want him to win, but I was super happy for Tyus when they won. Like he played super well. I was like, all right, I want Wisconsin to win, obviously, but Tyus, I would love Tyus to, go get 40 and lose, but that didn't really happen. But I mean, if you look at those Duke teams, like those two teams were probably some, like I would say the 2 best in program history. And this one is close. But they got to go and do it in the postseason now. Like, regular season is one thing. But it's unproven, like they've, those 2 teams, they made 2 Final Fours back to back. And that's super challenging to do in college basketball. So, they got a chance to be really good and a really special team, especially in program history. They've had a top 10 run, but I would compare them somewhat similar to, those years when, Flowers was there and Butch and those guys. That those teams were probably a little bit more comparable when they had like Alondo Tucker and that group.
Okay, when they
Because
have
those
Tucker.
teams were
Okay,
super
sure.
tough too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, when they
I
had
was
Alondo
if you're going to
Tucker,
compare like
Cameron
Camp
Taylor.
Taylor, sure. Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. And then
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of a different story. I think the 06-07 team is closer to 14-15 than people realize before Butch goes out. But that's for another time. But
Yeah.
I
They were
yeah,
dangerous.
they were number one in the country where they were ridiculously good teams in college basketball. Like there was really good teams in 14-15 and 06-07. You had that Greg Oden, Mike Conley, Ohio State team. Florida had like the 30 pros on their roster, and Wisconsin was number one in the month of February, and they beat Ohio State prior to Butch's injury. So, yeah,
Yep.
they were
Prior to him
really
breaking
good.
his
So,
elbow.
yeah, exactly. So, but this year's team, they have to prove it. But for me, I think it is within the realm of possibilities where they pass up at least the 13-14 team. They haven't done it yet, but I think they have the potential to. Like if they go on a run in the tournament, where I think there are some positions, and they're your friends, and they're obviously they're former teammates. So I'm not going to say who, but there's some areas where I think that I like this year's teams put at certain spots in the starting lineup and stuff better than in 13-14.
Oh no, specifically where? Yeah, this is just a good conversation. There is no offense
All right.
there. So specifically, where do you
Well, you're
think?
going to take offense. Well, I like. Well, one, if we're talking, I'm not going to say 13-14. I'm a big Trey Jackson guy. Trey Jackson's my guy, so I'm not going to say there. Preferably, I take my personal preference. They have restaurants and menus for a reason, right? I prefer Max Klesman over
Exactly.
Josh Gasser. And
Okay.
I take Tyler Wall. I mean, sophomore Nigel Hayes. Let's talk about the 13-14 team because 14-15 is kind of a different story where you had the Decker, Nigel, and Frank starting. The 13-14, I think they started
Mhm.
T-Jax, Gasser, Brust, Decker, and Tank.
And Frank.
Yeah. For me, AJ Storr is on, like, we compared Decker and Storr. Sophomore Decker
Yeah.
versus AJ Storr, easily Storr, and it's not even close for me. Storr is an absolute bucket getter. The levels he can score all three. I mean, Decker was a phenomenal slasher. He could punch it down on your head, but Storr's ability to score off the bounce, step back, his variety of just being a bucket.
I think
Versus
he has
sophomore Sam
I
Decker.
think I think Storr has a better touch around 2-point range.
Yeah.
For sure. I think he has a better pull-up game. Like that kind of middle game is a little bit more refined than Sam had when he was a sophomore. But I will say this: Sam shot like 60+% from two as a junior.
Yeah.
Nah, like
No,
when
he
he
was
went,
very
I think
good.
he went when he was in the tournament. I think he was shooting almost 80% from 2-point range going through that tournament.
But that's
his
the
junior
thing,
year. It
though. That's
was
the thing. Is like Decker had that phenomenal run, and I'm not ripping on Decker, but he had that
oh yeah
unbelievable run in
no.
2015, where perhaps that people's memories just think of what he did in that stretch run in 2015, where he was very good his whole career, but that wasn't the whole
Oh yeah.
story his whole career. A lot of people have they just remember at the very end, like my guy T Jackson, he came back from a broken foot, did absolutely nothing besides just trying to rehab and do a bunch of core workouts for 6 to 8 weeks, and then he's thrust onto the national stage against North Carolina, Duke, Arizona. Like that wasn't T-Jax. I saw T-Jax drop 25 on that same Duke team earlier in the year. So so
Oh
people
yeah, for
sometimes
sure.
remember the tail end of
And they had
careers.
a yeah.
Yeah.
Trey had some tough stuff because when Trey got hurt, everybody was like, "Oh, we're good. We got Bronson." And I love Bronson's game, and for me, it was the combination of both of them because Bronson had a little bit more cerebral and he was a little bit more on his jump shot, whereas Trey
Yeah.
was still cerebral, but he was much more of an attacker, and he had a much.
Yeah.
I feel like he had a much more polished 2-point game at that point, and he kind of knew how to lead that group. So because I remember when he got hurt against Rutgers in that year, and I was like, oh no, that's probably going to come back to haunt them in a way that we didn't want to, and it did in the national championship game. They had they didn't have another guard to really help out and attack as much as he used to.
Yeah.
So no, I completely understand that. Yeah, with T-Jax, I get you, and with Decker being younger and kind of figuring it out, I don't disagree with you.
And I think Crowell's very solid. I mean, Frank had that element of ball handling, but Crowell is just so physically solid at the center position, just so solid at everything in the game of basketball. And then Wall so physically solid. I prefer the 13-14 and the ability. I mean, this year's team over the 13-14, and just the depth is better on this year's team. The way they're putting the ball into the hoop at such a ridiculous rate. I mean, some of the points they're scoring, they're averaging more points per game than the 13-14 team did, playing a little bit faster.
They're
give
playing
the edge.
Though. Yeah, I can understand why too, and that is the one thing I will kind of say caveat wise is the different coaching styles. Coach Ryan still had his very set ways of how basketball should be played, and that man is smart. He knew how to win games. I'm not going to bash on that man for saying he does not know how to win games, but he did have a little bit of a leash on guys, and he wanted to play slower, and he knew that that's how he could win games. But he still let that team, that 13-14 team run a little bit more and be a little bit more offensive. But this team specifically, they just play at a faster pace. They have higher point. Their points per possession is pretty close to 1. Right around now for the season. I think I looked at it a couple weeks ago. I think it's still right around there, which is a great stat. They still have a high points per possession, which means they're a very efficient offensive team. And I really just like the shots that this team takes too. Like it's very, like for me, it's comparable in terms of 13-14, 14-15. They just get a lot of great looks. Like guys get good shots, and that leads to good offense a lot of times. Like they get good shots and they're making shots. So that's always a big thing. It's getting good shots is one thing, making good shots is another. So they have the element of both, which in the game of basketball is obviously pretty ideal.
Yeah, it's a make or miss game. There's no doubt, and we've seen some Wisconsin teams in recent memory where they it wasn't because they weren't getting open looks. You gotta knock down the open looks, and and I'm not saying yet they've passed them up, but I really like this team, and I think they definitely have the potential to at least pass up 13-14, 14-15 when you bring back 2 first-round picks. That might be tough. But and one other thing I do want to say is that you nailed it when it comes to T-Jax versus Bronson. A lot of common fans didn't really understand like that T-Jax brought different things to the table than Bronson. There's a reason T-Jax was the starting point guard. He earned it. I mean, he was an upperclassman, but he earned it. The athleticism and the ability and the strength to get into the lane, either create for himself or create for others or get to his mid-range game at will. Bronson would size up, pull up like 17-footer, but Trayvon could really create for others. And that they definitely, I mean, really at that point, you had Decker, who was the slasher at that point. And then there's like no one who could really get into the lane into the tournament and later that season. So I think people kind of underestimate that was a big loss for that team.
Yeah. Trey always got deep into the paint. Bronson could get to that kind of elbow free throw line area, but Trey had the ability to get below the free throw line, like right on top of the charge circle, and then make decisions. And that kind of inverts your offense. When you get the ball to that point in the floor, it's just kind of naturally a gravitational pull for defenses. No matter how disciplined you are, it doesn't matter who you are, even at the professional level, when the ball gets into that charge circle, middle of the paint area, it's like a gravitational force for everybody, and everybody takes a step in. And that's very different than, getting to the free throw line. The free throw line doesn't have that gravitational pull on defenses. So, that 14 team, when they lost Trey, they lost that aspect. And it's, it was a little disappointing that he didn't get to continue and had that injury, but also that's part of the game. So hopefully this team here can stay healthy. That's the biggest thing right now. I think for Wisconsin is they're going to win games as long as they keep playing well, and I think they will. But it's just at this point it's more about them being healthy, If they stay healthy, they should,
Yeah.
you know,
No, that's
end the Big Ten with a league title and have a very nice seed going into the tournament.
agreed. So as we wrap up here, just a few more. So for you, who do you think Wisconsin's number one rival is? Because I always have a tough time answering this one.
I mean, for me, number one is Marquette. Marquette is the number one
Marquette. Okay.
rival. Yeah, you know, it's rivalry 94, what, I-94 rivalry, whatever they call it on
Yes, sir.
TV.
You
But
got it.
yeah, for me, the biggest is Marquette because Marquette and Wisconsin have a lot of history. They're close. It's the two biggest programs in the state, and the biggest thing is there are Marquette fans within Wisconsin, but like 85% of the state is a Badger fan. So it's
Yeah.
it's a little bit rough if you lose in that matchup. Then you got to deal with the 15% who are going to be as loud as they can be, like, "Oh, you still lost to Marquette." Like,
No doubt.
so for me, it was Marquette always, and then afterwards, it was definitely Minnesota. But that was for me personally, because I'm a Minnesota kid. I grew up around there. I
Yeah.
knew the Gophers pretty well. I knew the staff when I was going through high school. Wisconsin always has done a good job of recruiting Minnesota. Right now they got 4 guys on the
It's
roster.
ridiculous.
Yeah. But that's because Minnesota produces good basketball players. Let's be honest. We got a
Yeah.
group of solid guys who are coming through there. So so that for me it was always, I think it would be Marquette first, Minnesota second. And I just never really liked Tom Crean, so I always thought Indiana was a big rival. I loved beating Indiana; it was always great. Never had to lose to those guys, thankfully. Indiana was
Yeah.
one, and then going through the Big Ten, like I also think Ohio State. When I was in school, it was a lot of times it was Ohio State and Michigan
Yeah.
State. Those were the two teams because going
Awesome
through when I
teams.
was there, Ohio State was super good, Michigan State was super good. They were competing for the league titles, and that's kind of what we were doing. We were trying to compete for league titles a lot, and they went through Michigan State and Ohio State and Purdue. Where those were like the 3 big
Yeah.
ones that we had a hard time getting through. So, but yeah, number one and number two, Marquette and Minnesota for sure.
Yeah. And just bringing up Indiana, Tom Crean, he probably all the adjusting of his pants didn't win you over, and all the standing on the sideline and and then the quick handshakes and yeah.
Yeah, he
I
would
will say
always.
that 2013.
I'll keep going.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, well,
I was going to
he
say that
always.
2013 game at Indiana. Oh,
Oh my
that
goodness!
2013 game at Indiana was a beautiful game.
I had a great time. It was super fun, and Tom Crean dead
Yeah.
fished, hand shook me so many times. Just here you go. This is my handshake for you. So he would always dead fish us, and then he was just so tan. I was like, I heard,
Cream.
yeah, he had a tanning bed in his house. He would tan in his house.
Okay,
He
I
was
believe it.
always like, go back and look at him, man. Go back and check out some pictures of Tom
Yeah.
Crean. That man is bronzed, and he lives in Bloomington, Indiana, in January.
Yeah.
He's not taking vacations. He's the head
Yeah.
coach of a basketball team. That man has a tanning bed in his house. So I always was just like,
No doubt.
one, slightly jealous, but two, I was like, you look kind of like an Oompa Loompa guy. Like, I can't lose to an Oompa Loompa at this point.
Yeah. And there's a happy medium, right?
Right. It was like,
So-
all right, we get it. So
So what do you think about AJ Storr, Johnny Davis' success? Do you think outside the program those narratives can ever be stripped away from Wisconsin about being the ugly, slow Wisconsin Badgers?
maybe, highly unlikely. We'll see. Like,
Sure.
it's to be determined. They got to keep having, like, the biggest thing is they got to kind of continue to have these higher octane offenses. And I think if Coach Gard keeps kind of running this stuff and letting them go, but it's also really challenging because of the style of play in the Big Ten. The Big Ten is starting to evolve a little bit more, which is great to see. They're starting to be, adapt their game a little bit more. And if you look at some of the rosters, there is still some big dudes that come through there, but that's also just kind of a league thing. Partially, if you look at the SEC, if you look at the ACC, and the style of basketball they play. They generally play a little bit more up and down and try and get going. The only exception is really Virginia. But that's just kind of the perception of not only the Big Ten, but Wisconsin within the Big Ten, which is always so interesting to me because, I remember playing in a game against Penn State and we won. I don't think we broke 40. I think we had like 35 or 40 points. It was super ugly, but we weren't the ones slowing the game down. It was Penn State that slowed the game down.
Yeah.
And so like, that's kind of the thing that is going to be hard to break is because one, Wisconsin is just that's just the label it's been, as well as if you listen to any broadcast, that's their sticking point.
Yes.
They're like, oh, this is Wisconsin shtick. Like, this is what they do. And it's like, this is what they've done. This is not what they're doing right now. So it's kind of like some media members want to continue with that narrative. And then the other thing is just the league itself. The Big Ten has kind of been that way. And until they kind of figure out a way to not be that way and transform the league and the style of play, which, may or may not happen. I think that kind of idea of how Wisconsin plays is going to stay there until like I said, until there's multiple years of like, oh no, they're scoring in the 80s. Yeah. This is not your old Wisconsin team. This is not a slow it down, grind you out, play good defense and win 55, 56. That's not the style that they're going to have. And I think Coach Gard has been trying to implement some of that too, seeing how he lets guys play and let them run. So, give it a couple more years and we can revisit this conversation and have a little bit more certainty about that.
No doubt. Sustained success, no doubt. And one other caveat I do want to throw is I've heard through the grapevine that Tom Crean is on the internet like a pit bull on a poodle, man. He hears everything. So there's a good chance Tom Crean hears your message to him. Anything you want to say?
Here's the deal. It's just what he looks like. I think he was a heck of a coach, though. Like, dude knew what he was doing. Like, dude knew how to coach. He knew how to motivate. Like, I just didn't like that he had a tanning machine in his house. But I'm also a pale ginger, so whatever.
The last question here is any updates on the TBT? Because I'm surprised no one picked it up, but you had a good little soundbite here talking about the TBT last time, and not winning. Winning solves everything. I would say now is the perfect time to get this rolling. Mend some fences between some alumni and the current program. Any update on the TBT here, Mike?
I haven't really approached it too much. I think if we're going to do it, I think it'd be Trey Jackson, myself, probably Jordan Taylor. Jordan Taylor and Sam Decker are playing together out in London. So it's possible now since Sam is out of the league and, it depends too. Frank Kaminsky's out the NBA right now too. He's playing for a EuroLeague team in Serbia called Partizan. So, there's a possibility that we could get some things together. For me, I think now that I'm going to be healthy, I think it would be awesome for me to try and get back and play in some high level basketball this summer if I can. I think now's not a terrible time to start kind of, turning up some conversations and definitely probably got to reach out to Trey Jackson here. I haven't spoken to him since about July. Something to do with that. And, it's definitely on the horizon. It's definitely a possibility. I would not be opposed to it. I think it'd be super fun to go back and play in the U.S. I haven't played in the U.S. and since my last TBT, which was like back in like 2016, I think. So hopefully we can get it kind of sparked up and figure some stuff out. I think it'd be fun.
Yeah, well, the team could kind of be ridiculously good with all the dudes who are out of the league now. So, yeah, that would be a lot of fun. I hope you can get that rolling. But yeah, Mike, I am super grateful for your time. Thank you for coming back on the show, and I'm looking forward to staying connected along the way.
Yeah, man, Matt, always enjoy our conversations, and anytime you want to talk hoops, let me know. I'm available to do it. I enjoy it very much, and enjoy speaking with you. You have a good program here, so always available whenever you ask. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, I'm going to take you up on that, so be ready.
Please do. It's an open invitation for a reason.
Good deal. I appreciate it. All right, I'll see you next time.